to address regarding the LSAT, you are welcome to use my email address. It's abell@manhattanprep.com. If you have questions about LSAT preparation in general, that would be a great way to reach me and ask about them. If you are just starting your LSAT journey, you might be thinking about the best way for you to prepare for the LSAT. And there are a lot of different ways out there. Some people study for the LSAT entirely on their own. Some people find it beneficial to take an LSAT class. Some people sign up for tutoring. Lots of different ways to achieve success. If you're interested in seeing what some of the different ways are like, we do have a few additional free options beyond an LSAT free prep hour. We offer courses, and you can try the first session of one of our courses for free. So it's a 3-hour session that focuses on logic games and logical reasoning. Those are available in most major metropolitan areas, and they're also available online. And you can check out the schedule on our website to find out how to sign up for one of those if you're interested. We also have a free sample available of our LSAT Interact course, which is a really great resource. The full LSAT Interact does a comprehensive job of covering our LSAT curriculum, and each of the videos is adaptive in the sense that as you go through the video, it'll ask you questions or you'll solve a problem and you'll submit your answer, and then it'll change the type of feedback that it gives you based on the answers that you submitted, so that it's kind of the closest thing to a live teacher without actually having a live teacher. So I encourage you to check those out. Today, we are going to focus on a particular topic together, and that is within the logical reasoning section of the LSAT. We are going to be working on a specific type of question, which is inference questions. For those folks who are just starting their LSAT journey, like I see Emmy says that she is, the LSAT is broken down into 3 major sections. Reading comprehension accounts for about 25% of your overall score. Logic games accounts for about 25% of your overall score. And there are actually 2 sections of logical reasoning, which means that logical reasoning accounts for 50% of your total LSAT score. So it's a really important part of your score. Within logical reasoning, there are about 10 different types of questions that the LSAT will ask you, and some of them are more common than others. The type of question that we're working on tonight, which is called Inference Questions, is one of the more common types of questions that you'll see on the LSAT. You can expect to see about 8 of these in total across both logical reasoning sections. So it's a really valuable thing to spend some time preparing for, which is why I chose it for us today. So before we try some actual inference questions, I just wanted to orient you a little bit to what I mean when I say an inference question. So when you're going through the logical reasoning section of the LSAT, you'll see somewhere between maybe 23 and 26 logical reasoning questions, and each of them will be a short paragraph, a question, and then 5 multiple choice answers. And so one of your most important jobs on logical reasoning is looking at that question. I always look at the question first to determine what is my job going to be? What do I need to think about and focus on for this particular logical reasoning question? The LSAT doesn't always use sort of formulaic question stems for every question type. So there are about 5 different ways that they can ask you to make an inference on the logical reasoning section, and those are listed here. You'll see about 3 of these in the problems that we do tonight. The most common ones are using the language of what do the statements above most strongly support, what must be true based on the statements above, and what can be properly inferred from the statements above. this is the type of thing that you may think about making flashcards for, or making yourself a cheat sheet for, so that after you have learned all of the different logical reasoning material and all the types of questions that are out there, you're able to bring that knowledge to the LSAT and apply it by recognizing the different types of questions when they show up all mixed together on the actual test. All right, so there's sort of a certain mindset that you need to be in for LSAT inferences in particular, and it's different from the type of mindset that you might be in if you were trying to make an inference in, let's say, an English class, or even if you were in like a meeting in a professional setting where creative inferences and creative thinking might be rewarded. The LSAT is very logical, of course, and very literal. And so it's helpful to just kind of get a feel for what types of inferences are considered okay and logically valid on the LSAT, and what types of inferences are considered incorrect or too much of a stretch. So we're going to take a look at these, this little drill. We have a statement here, which we're calling the given. So we're saying this statement is true for the purpose of this exercise. Daily jogging is an effective approach to losing weight. So if this is true, I want you to take a moment to decide which of these 6 statements would we say are also true. Which ones can we infer on the basis of this given statement? There could be more than one, or maybe just one, or maybe none at all. I'm going to give you about a minute to read each of these statements and decide which of them you think could be true, or I'm sorry, which of them you think we can properly infer. And based on that, I want you to tell me in the chat window, just give me the numbers of any statements that you think we can properly infer based on this given. I'm going to pause myself for a second and let you do that. Okay, thank you for your answers. Keep them rolling in if you're still thinking about them. So many people are surprised to find for this particular set of possible answers that the only inference that the LSAT would consider valid is inference number 3, that not all approaches to losing weight are ineffective. If we think through the logic behind this, the given is basically telling us that there is one way to effectively lose weight, and that way is daily jogging. Maybe there's more, but there is definitely at least one. So if there is at least one effective way, then we know that not all approaches are ineffective because there's got to be at least one. This is kind of a classic style for a correct answer on an inference question. There are a couple of things about it that are notable. One is that it sort of inverts the information that we've been given. So it goes from a positive statement of something that is true to then saying something that is not the case based off of that. Another thing that's kind of classic about this is that it shifts the language a little bit. So you have daily jogging here, and daily jogging is not mentioned in statement 3, so that you aren't just looking to match language from the statement to the answer choice that you have to do some thinking. You have to consider, would this have to be true based off of the text? One of the most dangerous things you can do in logical reasoning is to rely solely on the visual cues of seeing words that match, and assuming that if I see words that match, that this must be a valid inference. You always have to think it through. So it's helpful to know why these other 5 statements would be considered logically invalid, because they fall into sort of classic wrong answer patterns that the LSAT will use frequently on logical reasoning questions and inference questions in particular. So I'm going to draw them out for you. The first one, notice this word best. As an experienced LSAT taker, this is the first place that my eyes go to in this answer choice. I always notice really strong language like best or always or most. And I'm always very skeptical of that because it's hard to prove that on an inference question. It's hard to prove something that is truly the best. So I check to see, did they really prove that this is the best? No, they proved that it is one effective way to lose weight. So this is what we would call an issue of degree. It would not be considered a valid inference. The second one has some of the language of the given, that daily jogging is included. But instead of saying it's effective to lose weight, it says you can lose muscle mass. This is something that the LSAT likes to do, where they take sort of a similar related concept and they substitute it for what they're really talking about in the text. Losing weight and losing muscle mass aren't necessarily the same thing. So we wouldn't say that this is a valid inference. We would say this is an example of what we call detail creep, which just means they're in a very subtle way shifting a seemingly minor detail, often swapping it out for something that you might not recognize because it's related or familiar. Statement 4 is an interesting one because it uses both weight and jogging. So it looks like it lines up with our text. But notice that our text is kind of leading us in one logical direction, that if you jog, that might be a way to lose weight. And statement 4 is kind of leading us in the other direction. Trevor lost weight, so he must have jogged. That is an example of what we call reverse logic, which is a very, very common trap on inference questions. The language will look the same, but the logical order is switched, which is a logical fallacy. It's not something that you're allowed to do on the LSAT or in general. Statement number 5, many people who jog find it to be an enjoyable activity. That's nice, and it's certainly possible based on the information that we've been given, but we really don't know. There's nothing here that proves to us that people who jog find it to be enjoyable. This is what we would call out of scope, which is when the answer choice brings in something that's just so off topic that it's really not supported at all by the text. And then the last one, exercising is healthy, again, seems like it could be a safe inference based off of this, but it's making some assumptions. The biggest assumption it's making is that losing weight would be considered healthy. That's not necessarily the case, and it's the type of leap that the LSAT is not okay with. Those two terms aren't synonyms for each other, so we wouldn't make that generalization here. So this is an example of an unsubstantiated generalization where we're going from something pretty specific and making a much broader claim that we can't support off the basis of this. I'm going to pause for a moment to let you process this. And if you have any questions about any of these, throw them in the chat window. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions right now. So we're going to go ahead and try a few inference questions. And our goals for these inference questions might vary depending on where we're at in our LSAT prep. If this is the first time that you're hearing about inference questions and the first time that you're trying them out, then your goal is really to just orient yourself to the type of thinking that you need to be doing on inference questions. If you are a little bit further along in your LSAT prep, then my suggested goal for you would be to pay really close attention to the different wrong answer traps that are available or that are presented on inference questions. I see a question from Maurice. Do the subject in an inference question always follow correctly, such as jog, therefore lose weight? That's a great question. They don't always follow in the order. So what you're thinking about is what is the logical order which we come up with by thinking of the idea of an if-then statement. So I could write a sentence that says like, jogging leads to losing weight. And if I were to translate that into an if-then statement, it would be, if somebody jogs, then they will lose weight. And so the logical order is considered to be jog, then lose weight, like this. But I could rearrange this sentence so that the jogging doesn't come first. So I could say, for example, losing weight is caused by jogging. Even though losing weight comes first in the sentence, I would still say, okay, so if you jog, then that must mean you're going to lose weight. So what you want to think about is not what order do the words come in, but how would I arrange the logic of the ideas to say, if this idea happens, then what is the consequence? Which of these ideas is a trigger, an if? Which of these ideas is an outcome or a result, which is the then part? Excellent question. All right, so here's your first inference question, where our aim is to average about 1 minute and 20 seconds per question in the logical reasoning section in order to get through all of the questions in the allotted time, which is 35 minutes. So I'm going to be timing you tonight. It might feel like a lot of pressure if you're just starting out with the LSAT, and that's okay. It's something that you will get used to with a lot of practice. It doesn't mean anything's unusual if it feels a little tight right now. All right, you have 1 minute and 20 seconds. I'll send out a poll when the time is up to let you know to send me your answer. Okay, I've sent out a poll. I see a few of you have put your answers in the chat, but I'll just ask you to go ahead and pick an answer in the poll. If you had to pick right now, what would you say? All right, nice. We got a lot of correct answers rolling in. So the correct answer to this question is C. This is an example of an inference that kind of pieces together a few different pieces of information and links them together to provide us with the correct answer. So we see in the original text that these laboratory mice are in an environment that is described as not normal. And then we're told that if the environment is not normal, the reliability of research is diminished. So we can infer that the laboratory mice are in that abnormal environment that diminishes the reliability of research. So putting a couple pieces together to prove that this research is what we would consider compromised. Notice that the LSAT disguises the correct answer a little bit by changing the language. So rather than saying it's unreliable, they say it's compromised. So you have to think to yourself, is that a reasonable way to describe something that's not reliable? Would it be compromised? And the answer is yes. This is a great question to take a look at what's up with some of the incorrect answers. The incorrect answers on this particular question fall into two categories that we haven't seen yet. One is an incorrect prediction, and the other one is what we would call an illegal negation. I'll show you one of each, and then I'm going to ask you to think about how you would classify the other two answers. So one that I would describe as an incorrect prediction is answer choice A. Answer choice A talks about whether the conditions are likely to change in the future. Whenever I notice that an answer choice is talking about the future, that's something I pay attention to because I want to check to see if the text talked about the future or if it's just talking about the present or the past. In this particular text, it's really just talking about the present. This is mice that are used right now. This is how they're usually kept. There's nothing in this text that implies that it will go on this way forever or that it won't. Who knows? Answer choice B is an example of what I would think of as an illegal negation. So in the text, we are told that these mice are not in good conditions. They're not being kept in good environmental conditions for them. And so it diminishes the quality of the research. Notice what answer choice B does. It kind of takes that set of conditions, mice are not in good conditions, therefore the research is diminished, and it negates both of them. It says if they were in good or better conditions, then that would be like a good indicator for the research. The problem with that is that we just don't know. Perhaps there are other factors going on with these mice that are also making them making this research less reliable. So perhaps it wouldn't be enough to just improve their living conditions. This negation form is common where you have the first or the if part of a statement is either negative or positive, and then it's switched in the second part. Here, the then is negative, it diminishes research, and then it's switched to the positive, that the research is good. All right, so I'd like for you to take a minute to look at D and E and try to figure out which one would you identify as an illegal negation, which one would you identify as an incorrect prediction, and tell me in the chat window. Again, the question is D and E. Which one would you say is an illegal prediction? Which one is an illegal negation? Nice. Yeah, see some great answers coming in. So D is talking about whether they will develop new research techniques. That makes it an illegal prediction. E is an illegal negation. We find here that laboratory mice that are used for human health research are kept in small cages, and answer choice E just negates that. Laboratory mice that are not used in human health research are not kept in small cages. All right, excellent work, everybody. You are off to a great start. One thing that I find helpful to know as I'm doing logical reasoning practice is kind of the rough difficulty level of the questions I'm doing. One thing that's good to know about logical reasoning is that the difficulty of the questions in general gets harder as the section goes on. In particular, questions 1 through 5 tend to be the lowest difficulty questions of a section. And there's a big spike in difficulty between about questions 15 through 22. So when you're working on pinpointing what exactly do I want to do for my practice, if you're just getting started with a question type, then early, easier questions might be what you focus on. If you are feeling more advanced and you want to work on more challenging material, then you might work on questions from that section of the test. Ashley's asking, is it ever wrong to skip a question and come back to it at the end / when you have time? No, it's definitely not wrong to do that. In fact, that's a great time management strategy on the LSAT. My suggestion would just be to go ahead and select an answer for that question in the moment and put a star or mark it. And that way, if you accidentally run out of time to come back to it, you won't leave a question blank. But time management is really challenging on the LSAT, and so skipping questions is an important part of managing your time. Maurice is asking just to repeat which ones are the easier questions. So in general, questions about 1 through 5 tend to be lower difficulty. Questions about 15 through 22 tend to be the most challenging. Everything else falls kind of somewhere in between. There's a sort of spike in difficulty that happens between about questions 8 through 10. And that's important because that's kind of there to throw off your timing. So if you hit question number 9 and it's really hard and you spend a lot of time on it, it is likely going to throw you off and leave you with not enough time for these really challenging questions, 15 to 22. Interestingly, also the last couple of questions in a logical reasoning section tend to be a little bit less difficult than this really challenging section. And unfortunately, if you don't manage your time well, you can run out of time for those last 2 questions. So one way you can beat the LSAT at its own game is by prioritizing the last couple questions of a section. All questions are worth the same number of points, 1, no matter whether they're easy or difficult. So you want to start by making sure you get all the easy questions for you right, and then prioritize the more difficult ones. And when I say start, I don't mean do all the questions out of order. I just mean when you're prioritizing what you want to get correct on the LSAT, you want to make sure that you get the questions that you can do quickly and confidently at the very least. All right, so we're going to move up to that section where there's a bit of a spike in difficulty. Let's see how we do with question number 8. I'll give you 1 minute and 20, and then I'll send out another poll. All right, that's about 1 minute and 20 seconds. I've sent you a poll. Take a moment to put in what you think the correct answer is at this point. Okay, thank you to everybody who voted. Let's take a look. It looks like we are currently split between two answers, answer choice A and answer choice C. One interesting thing about both of these answers is that they're both predictions, but they're sort of different types of predictions. Answer choice A is just a straight prediction. This is a thing that's going to happen soon. Answer choice C is a hypothetical prediction that's saying if one thing happened, here's another thing that would happen. So what we want to do with each of these that we're down to is check them very closely against the text. So answer choice A tells us that the microbe's activity will soon diminish. Why is it going to diminish? The organic molecules are going to be depleted. So I want to check back to see if I have any evidence that these organic molecules will be depleted. I see that it says the microbes consume the organic molecules. Okay, so they definitely take away organic molecules. I have some questions though, like I don't know how many molecules there are currently. How fast are these being consumed? Do more of these molecules show up? Like, are they able to reproduce and have new organic molecules coming up in the exposed rock? So I'm not 100% sure that there's justification to say that they're going to be depleted soon. In particular, that word soon makes me unsure because I don't see anything here about the rate at which these organic microbes are being, organic molecules are being consumed. So I will cross off answer choice A for that reason. I would call this a false prediction. Answer choice C is a little bit different. Hypotheticals can be a bit easier to prove as predictions because they might give you a scenario that is talked about in the text. So they say, if global warming occurs. Well, I remember global warming being talked about. It says that the microbes remove oxygen and generate carbon dioxide, which promotes global warming. So the microbes have an action that promotes global warming. So if global warming occurs, it will be exacerbated or made worse by the activity of the microbes. Well, yeah, if microbes promote global warming, then the activity of the microbes exacerbates global warming or would exacerbate it. So answer choice C is the correct answer here. If you have any questions about the distinction between A and C, definitely put them in the chat. While you're doing that, I'm going to take a moment to talk about the other three answer choices. One of the things that is demonstrated by this problem is the need to pay attention to language strength, and especially to pay attention to quantifier words. Those are often going to be the deal breakers for inference answer choices. So when I look at answer choice B, for example, it says every organism that generates carbon dioxide reproduces more quickly at high temperature. That word every is very strong, and it's a quantifier where it's telling me 100% of organisms do this. So I want to quickly look back at the text and check, is that the case? It looks like the scope of this information is really just about certain microbes, and in every sentence they talk about the microbes in particular. So it's not fair to say that this is true for every organism, so I'd cross that out. Similarly, answer choice E uses a quantifier word, talking about a significant portion. So this is a measurable quantifier word. I would go back to the text and see, do they use any synonyms or give any indication that this is a significant portion? It talks about they do generate carbon dioxide. It says they reproduce more quickly at high temperatures, but it doesn't talk about how much carbon dioxide they produce. So I would cross off answer choice A. And then answer choice D, they do not remove any element other than oxygen from the atmosphere. This is a different but frequent issue that can come up. When I see the word other, I'm often wondering, is this going to be a little bit off topic, or is this going to be a little out of scope? The word other is often used on the LSAT to introduce concepts that are outside the scope of the text. So in this case, elements other than oxygen being removed from the atmosphere. We don't know that based on the text. We just know that it does remove oxygen. So possible, but we have no proof. Ashley asked a great question. She said, I panicked and picked A. Should I always look out for hypothetical options as my first choice when running out of time? The short answer to that is no, but I'll give you a couple of alternative strategies that you might use instead. So the first thing is that on any logical reasoning question, your best friend is going to be process of elimination. So if you're going to end up needing to guess on a particular question, what you want to do is start by working from wrong to right. Look out for some of the red flags that we've discussed so far. So for example, super strong language is a big red flag. The word other is a big red flag. And try to eliminate as many as you can confidently be sure are incorrect. If you're going to guess, it's much better to guess from a couple of answers than to guess just sort of randomly based on a single word or phrase. The reasons I wouldn't guess just a hypothetical is that there isn't always a hypothetical, and I would say hypotheticals are just as likely as any other answer choice to potentially be wrong. They're just a little easier to prove right than a prediction, but it doesn't always break out that way in a logical reasoning question. The way that you would guess in logical reasoning differs from question to question. So if you're on an inference question, especially one that says something like, which of the following is most strongly supported, the way that I would guess is to try to use pick something that has weaker language. So not something that says like all, but something that says some, for example. And we'll see an example of this in a later question. The reason I would guess that way is that weaker ideas are easier to prove. It's harder for me to prove that all dogs are friendly than for me to prove that some dogs are friendly. So that would be a rule that I would use. The rule will change a little bit when you're doing different types of questions. So that's something to attend to when you are doing your logical reasoning study. Maurice asked, considering the stimulus asks provide the most support for, should we look for actual support or premise in the text? Great question. No. For this type of question, for inference questions in particular, the concept of finding the premise and finding the conclusion does not apply. That is a concept that you would use on other question types that are focused on assumptions and breaking down and kind of figuring out what's wrong with an argument. So you would use that idea of finding the support or the premise in assumption questions, strengthen and weaken questions, and flaw questions. The reason that you don't need to do that is the way I would think of this is an inference is similar to an incomplete argument. So it's almost like everything that you have at the top it's all going to be a potential premise. And there should be at least some part of it that could then support your correct answer, which could be a conclusion based off of that premise. So there's no need to label them because they're all going to be potential support. Instead, you just want to pay attention to details and think about how they link together. Awesome questions. Keep them coming. Let's take a look at another inference question. Minute and 20 again for this. All right, go ahead and pull in your answers when you're ready. Okay, so you can see the difficulty of the questions increasing a little bit here as we get into that 8 through 10 spike in difficulty, and I can see that reflected in the fact that of the folks who voted, we've got 4 different answer choices that have been selected. First, I want to go back to Ashley's question from the last inference problem about what would you guess? If you're just using the principle that I shared with you, which is this is an inference question, so let's guess an answer with weaker language. Take a moment to think about which answers you would not guess because the language is too strong. And if you could see any that would be like not a great guess because the language is so strong, tell me in the chat window. Okay, so I see some interesting ones. I see A, B, C, and E, people honing in on different concepts of that. So let's check out the strong language. So A starts with any particular individual will be allergic to some breeds of cat, but not to others. So this is talking about all people. That's really strong. So it's not something that I would guess, but I would still investigate it, assuming I have time to do that on this question, and check to see if there's any reason for me to think that. So I would go back to the text and say, okay, where do they talk about being allergic to some versus others? They do say the proteins that are responsible vary from sufferer to sufferer. But the scope of this problem is people who are allergic to cats, which implies the possibility that some people might not be allergic to cats at all. So it's a little too strong to say that anyone who is allergic is going to be allergic to some breeds, but not to others, because this doesn't account for people who are just not allergic to any type of cat at all. Some people will just not be allergic, period. So I would cross that off. B is also one that has very strong language. No cat. Okay, no cat what? No cat is capable of causing an allergic reaction in all types of allergy sufferers. Well, they do say that it's common for one cat to cause an allergic reaction in some, but not all people. Do they say that that is always the case? No, they say that this is common for a cat to cause allergic reaction for some, but not all people. So it is possible that there's one really, really highly allergenic cat that is going to cause a reaction, and maybe it is just an uncommon cat. So we don't have the strength of language to suggest that no cats are capable of doing this, so I'd cross this off. C is one that at first glance can look like it's strong because I see the word all and I see the word not. And those are strong words when I use them separately. When I use them together, it's actually equivalent to a weak word. So if I say not all cats are identical, that means that at least some cats are not identical. This is just saying less than 100% of cats are identical. It is softening a very strong word. It's softening the word all. And that's actually a good thing. So let's check to see if we have support for this idea. So are they all identical with respect to the proteins that they secrete? Well, what we know about those proteins is that they come from the animal's skin and they're responsible for the variations in who is going to suffer from allergies. But we know that there are lots of cats out there that seem to secrete different proteins, provoking different responses in different people. So it is fair to say that they're not all identical. If they were all identical, then everybody would suffer the same types of allergies from the same types of cats, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So C is our correct answer. Take a look at the others. E is another one that was identified as having strong language. There is no way. There's no way to predict whether a certain cat is going to produce an allergic reaction. If we check this out, it says that it's common for a cat to produce a reaction in some, but not all people. But there's nothing in here about whether we know which cats produce which reactions. Maybe we do. Maybe you could just go to a veterinarian and they would tell you these types of cats are going to, be what you're allergic to. Maybe an allergist could test for that. We don't know based off of just the text alone. So we would cross off E. D is the only one that doesn't have that sort of quantitative language. It has, or it does have quantitative language, but it's not strong. It says some people. So that is a great word. I love the word some on inference questions. Maybe this is going to be correct. But what I noticed is that it's comparing the intensity of their reaction. Some people have more intense reactions. Comparisons are always something that I pay attention to in answer choices. So if I see more or less, I do a quick look back at the text to see, was there any type of comparison? And in this case, there was not. They didn't say who has a worse reaction. So I'm going to cross off answer choice D. This was the most difficult question that we've done so far, so I would love to hear your reflections on it. Now that you've seen the correct answer and the reasoning behind the different correct answers, what is the lesson you would learn from this question? And I would love for you to take a moment to think about what lesson you would learn from this question and type it in the chat window. Yi is asking, is it possible that all cats just secrete the same types of proteins, but people are just allergic to some of them, which varies from individual to individual? I think yes, that is possible based off of this. The criteria for a correct answer on this type of question isn't that it has to be 100% true. So there could be some minor possible exceptions that are unlikely and not suggested by the text. The reason for that is the question asks us what is most strongly supported. So out of all of these answer choices, the text seems to be most leading us to the idea that these cats don't have identical proteins. The proteins are responsible for the allergic reactions, and people have different allergic reactions is a connection of ideas that would logically lead us to think that these cats have different proteins. There might be a way to think your way out of that, but this is an example of like, this is the correct amount of support that answer choice C needs to prove this. Jacqueline asked, how do you balance trying to find support in the stimulus for each answer choice with staying on top of timing? That's a great question. The way that I balance it is by getting really quick at identifying these wrong answer characteristics so that I know what to check right away. As I'm teaching this to you, I'm kind of drawing you back to the text for each answer choice to kind of accommodate anyone who might think that answer was correct, and to make sure you get a clear explanation. But when I'm actually doing a logical reasoning question on the LSAT, there are several of these that I would have crossed off without looking back at the text because I did a strong first read of the text and I'm sure that that answer is incorrect. And then there are some questions that are going to be easier than others, and on those easy questions you'll be able to do more eliminations without looking back at the text. And on harder questions, you may find yourself needing to look back at 3 or 4 of the answers. And the critical thing is to just make sure you're looking back with the right focus. So if you know, for example, okay, I just want to see, did they talk about, is this more intense? Then it can be a pretty quick scan to make that decision. If you're reading this entire answer choice and trying to think about all aspects of it, that is going to take you longer. So you want to figure out what is the particular part of this answer choice that I want to verify or validate, and let me check that part. And it's helpful if you pick the part that is the most likely to be wrong, because then you're more likely to go back in the text and find that it's not supported and get rid of it. All right, I see some great takeaways coming in. It is really important to look at the language in the answer options. Using the process of elimination is a great takeaway. I see a lot of people focusing on language. Yep, time management strategies. So time management will definitely come with lots of practice. So one of the things that you want to do in your preparation for the LSAT is to do a combination of what we call targeted practice and mixed practice. Targeted practice means you say kind of what we're doing right now, like today I'm just going to do a bunch of inference questions. And the goal of targeted practice is to really learn the patterns of inference questions so that you can be much faster at implementing the type of recognition and thinking that you're going to need to get through these quickly. Mixed practice comes later in your LSAT preparation when you've learned a bunch of different types of questions and you've gained some mastery over those types of questions. And then you want to start putting them all together and practicing managing your time amongst a variety of questions. So you might do, for example, an entire logical reasoning section from a practice test in 35 minutes. When you do mixed practice, you're balancing your time investment. So you're thinking about, are there any questions that I want to skip on because they look really impossible to me, compared to questions that I just want to go quickly on because I know they're pretty easy, or questions that are challenging but doable that I want to kind of slow down on. All right, lots of great takeaways. Thank you, everybody. We are getting close to the end of our time, so I just want to take a minute to wrap things up. If you are interested in finding out more about the Manhattan Prep classes, you can check out our upcoming courses on our website. That will give you the schedule, the locations, and the opportunity to sign up to try one of them out for free. If you have LSAT questions in general that are a little bit broader than our topic today of inference questions, I'll give you my email one more time. You're welcome to send me an email to follow up. We also have a great, very knowledgeable student services department that you can reach at lsat@manhattanprep.com. I will stick around for a few minutes to answer any general questions that you want to put in the chat window. If you don't have any questions, then thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again at a future free prep hour, and good luck with your LSAT studies. Emily, that's a great question. I think, yes, to a certain extent, it's getting a good grasp on your internal clock. So one thing that you want to build is your sense of a minute. That'll be really helpful across all sections of the test. When you're doing that, one exercise you can use is to take your cell phone and use the stopwatch, which just counts up, and engage yourself in some activity. It doesn't even have to be LSAT related. It could be like reading a book or cooking dinner, and just kind of tap the stopwatch, the lap button, every time you think a minute has passed. And then, do that maybe 10 times and then check to see right now, is your sense of a minute kind of fast? Is it kind of slow? Is it spot on? And just keep doing that exercise. And what you want to be able to do is maintain the flow of what you're doing, but still have a sense that of how to, that a minute has elapsed and that you might need to think about wrapping it up. The other thing to learn regarding timing is sort of the patterns of each test section. So getting comfortable with what I shared about how logical reasoning has a difficulty curve, starts off easier, has a more challenging section towards the end. If you know that information, you can use it to your advantage to say, first 5 questions are probably going to be easy. I can trust my instincts. Maybe I won't read every single answer choice exactly. I will pick the answer that I predicted because it's likely to be correct. But in later questions, I'm going to slow down. I might pick and choose which questions I attempt towards the end of the section because I know more of them are going to be hard. Maurice, great question. So that's a big question, and it might be better one for us to discuss over email because it kind of depends on what you're currently doing to better prepare and what you've done in the past to prepare. A couple of general principles of preparing for the test is you want your study plan to be both comprehensive and personalized to your data. So you want to make sure that you're learning everything that there is to learn about the LSAT, and that can be accomplished just through a strong curriculum, like a good set of LSAT books, but also that you want to take each practice test that you do and figure out what are my particular strengths and weaknesses, what types of questions am I having a hard time with, and why am I having a hard time with them. In general, if you're planning to take the June LSAT, I forget what exact date that is on, but once you are, okay, June 3rd, thank you. As I see that all caps. So when you're about 3 weeks out from your actual test date is when you want to kind of ramp up practice tests. So you just want to make sure you have a great cycle of, I take a practice test, I do a really, really deep, thoughtful review of that practice test where I very strongly understand everything that went wrong for me. I take a few days to brush up on any content or practice any strategies that were holding me back on my last practice test, and then I take another one. For the last 2 to 3 weeks of your LSAT prep, our general recommendation is to take 2 to 3 practice tests per week. I'd be happy to give you additional suggestions. Feel free to send me an email with some more details about your past LSAT experience and what you've been doing.